Joined now by Will Backus, CBS Sports.com. And Will, you guys did your Big 12 predictions. That's why I reached out to you. You guys are doing it all across the conference. But yours, you broke with the mold a little bit more in your second place pick with Oklahoma State. And I'm curious to talk about that. But when you go through all these now, how hard is it to do it, given the fact that the schedules are so uneven and unbalanced throughout the leagues, as opposed to before, where it was pretty easy to kind of guess where people were gonna fall?
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, you mentioned we did this for all four power conferences. The Big 12 was the absolute most difficult for multiple reasons. You mentioned the scheduling. Yeah, it is a little lopsided. I had Oklahoma State in second place, but Oklahoma State has to play both Utah and Kansas State during the regular season. That's tough, whereas a Kansas only has to play Kansas State. So, yeah, the scheduling was a little bit lopsided. And then, honestly, it was really hard to separate probably the top 5 or 6 teams for me. I mean, I think that this is a league where you could look at really anybody in kind of the top half and be like, okay, I could see a path that they could win, or I could see a path that they could at least make the Big 12 championship game. So, yeah, I mean, it was a very difficult conference to suss out and really kind of get that final tiering.
What put Utah over the top for you over K-State? I think if you were to poll most people, that's the one matchup that is probably the most popular of a pick. But what put the Utes up there at the top?
Yeah, I mean, I love what they have coming back, all over the place. Obviously, Cam Rising's coming back for his 7th year of college football. I mean, he's to be honest, he's older than I am at this point. And so when you've got that at quarterback, I mean, that's experience that you really can't replace. But I think they also have really underrated skill talent with Money Parks. I think he's going to be a huge breakout. Dorian Singer, obviously he had some great experience at Arizona and USC. And then Brent Keithy, they're also 7th-year tight end coming back from injury. That's the offense. And on defense, their front 7, I think, is probably the best front 7 in the Big 12, or it's definitely up there. That's kind of always been Kyle Whittingham's bread and butter. He's always got really tough teams that get dirty in the trenches, and I just think that they're really well made to come out and make a big impression in the first year. I love, Kyle Whittingham's track record. I love the experience that they have. And when I look at preseason rankings, I lean on experience over a lot of other things because there's just so much unknown when you're doing these projections. And so, I think it's that experience factor that really kind of put them over the edge for me.
You have Oklahoma State in second. So does Jerry Palm, who's listed right next to you. I'm getting to this point with Mike Gundy where I don't really need a reason to tell you why they're going to be towards the top of the league. It's just going to have to work out that way because he's just pretty steady.
Yeah, I mean, he's like you mentioned, he's super steady. And, credit to my coworker Shahan, but he pointed this out. Oklahoma State tends to do a lot better when they're not projected to win the Big 12. Obviously, they came in 3rd in the Big 12 preseason media poll. So, maybe that puts a chip on their shoulder. Maybe it's just something about Mike Gundy where he loves sort of outperforming expectations. But yeah, I mean, it's also he's earned the benefit of the doubt. He and Kyle Whittingham both are the most experienced coaches in the Big 12. They're battle proven. They've both shown that they can compete at the top of their respective conferences. Obviously, Mike Gundy's been doing it in the Big 12 a lot longer just because Oklahoma State's been in the Big 12 a lot longer. So yeah, I mean, there's that. And then also with Oklahoma State, same thing with Utah, right? Oklahoma State has 21 starters coming back from last year's team. That's an absurd amount of returning production. I just had a hard time thinking, okay, well, this exact same team made it to the Big 12 championship game last year. Why can't they do it again? And so that's a big reason why I picked them to make it that far. Is just they're battle tested. They've got a lot of guys that know how to win in this conference, from coach down to player and personnel, everything in between. But I see them making it to the Big 12 championship game.
Will, who's the hardest team for you to figure out right now on paper in the Big 12?
I think I had some difficulty with Arizona, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, they lost Jed Fish. He's a great coach. He did some amazing work rebuilding them. But they retained most of their top players in the transfer portal. Brent Brennan came in, did a great job of keeping Noah Fafita and Tetaroa McMillan and Sicario Davis. And so they've got some real superstar talent there. If I'm looking at a team like outside of the top four that I think, I wouldn't be surprised to see them, 10 wins near the end of the year, pushing for a Big 12 championship game appearance, it would be Arizona. I also think there's a little bit of bust potential just because while they did hold on to some superstars, they still did have some really important depth pieces and even some starters enter the transfer portal. You've obviously got, a new coach coming in. So I think it was a little hard to place them. I think they're going to be good. I think they're going to get to probably 8, maybe even 9 wins. And I could see them doing more too. But yeah, it was a little hard to get them kind of in the right spot for me.
What team towards the bottom do you think could surprise people?
So I think I'm a little higher on Houston than a lot of people, just because I love Willie Fritz. I know it took him some time to hit his stride at Tulane, but once he got going, he built Tulane into an absolute powerhouse. Of course, you've got questions about, well, how is he going to adjust to the jump to the Big 12? I know Houston's lost a lot to the transfer portal, but I also know a lot of people are really high on their quarterback, Donovan Smith. I've seen his name kind of rocketing up draft boards this year. And so they could have a real kind of gem on their hands in quarterback. You combine that with who they have at coach. I'm not saying they're going to come out and, set the world on fire. I think it'll be kind of a stretch for them even to kind of get into bowl contention. But I don't think they're going to be as bad as a lot of people think they are. And I don't see them finishing like dead last in the conference. I know they were picked 15th in the preseason media poll. I picked them to finish a little bit higher than that. Like I said, I've just got a lot of faith in Willie Fritz, and I think that they've got a really good quarterback that maybe a lot of people haven't quite adjusted for just yet.
So I know that there's a lot to take in terms of this article, so I don't want to spoil it and leave plenty for people to read, but everybody has their bold prediction on what's going to happen this season. And I will say yours is pretty bold, but I think it's one of those really interesting questions that people have in this expanded playoff is sort of where does the Big 12 fit in? Everybody's busy arguing like, can the SEC or Big 10 get 6 teams in any given year? Your bold prediction is that the Big 12 is able to get 2 college football playoff teams, and you think there's a handful that have a shot. But what made you go that direction as far as your bold prediction?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just the strength at the top of this conference. I see the Big 12 finishing with probably, 5 or 6 teams ranked. I think when you look at the, strength of schedule is a really important metric when it comes to figuring out college football playoffs, and conference perception plays a lot into it as well. So I think if you're looking at the end of the year, right, you're going to have, from my projections, you're going to have Big 12 champion Utah. Okay, well, they automatically make it in. But then you could have a 10 or 11 win Oklahoma State, 10 or 11 win Kansas State behind them, where their only losses, in Oklahoma State, maybe their only losses against Utah, right? Or maybe their only loss is against a really strong Kansas State team. I just think that it's going to be a real big logjam at the top of the conference. I think that it's going to be a really strong conference this year. And with all the strong teams, I think that's going to boost the Big 12 perception. And I think they might get a nod over. For me, it came down to the Big 12 and the ACC, right? The SEC is going to get probably 3 or 4 teams in. The Big 10 is going to get a few in. Notre Dame might sneak in there as an independent. So that really only leaves a couple spots. And if I look at the relative strengths of conferences, I just think the Big 12 is in a bit of a better place overall than the ACC, to where I could see a Big 12 team, a second Big 12 team sneaking in over a second ACC team as we sit here, just based off of how I think the year is going to kind of end up and how these teams are going to finish.
Do you, when you look at the Big 10 and that, a 9-3 Big 10 team, and I know this would happen in the SEC, so I'm not going to ask the question because 9-3 Ole Miss is in. But a 9-3 Big 10 team that's not, say, Ohio State, Michigan, or Oregon, do you think that team gets in?
I would say no. And that's because I think the only 9-3 team that you could make an argument, from the Big 10 sneaking into the playoff would probably be Michigan. Because as it stands, Michigan has to play 3 of the top 4 preseason AP poll teams, right? And so if those are their only 3 losses, and those are all close losses, then I could see the argument being made, well, maybe 9-3 Michigan deserves a nod. I don't see any Big 10 teams outside of those three that you mentioned being 9-3 and making it, because the other one I'd look at would be Penn State. Well, Penn State's schedule is pretty easy. So if they end up at 9-3, then something's probably gone wrong for them. And those three losses are going to be, at least one or two of them are going to be what you would look at as bad losses that they probably shouldn't have had. And then there's probably some other Big Ten teams there on the outside that would probably need to get to 10 wins to earn playoff consideration. So, yeah, I mean, outside of Ohio State, Oregon, or Michigan, I don't think I see a 9-3 Big Ten team making it in there.
Did anybody make as bold a prediction as Dennis did in the ACC one, where he predicted that ESPN would opt out of the ACC deal?
No, I mean, that's pretty bold, but I mean, Dennis is incredibly plugged in. I do not doubt his information. I'm sure it was a very informed, bold prediction. Not saying he's saying that's going to happen. You know, I'm not putting that out there, but yeah, I mean, it was very bold, but you know, I think the path that's going down is Florida State and probably Clemson are going to be free agents sometime in the next few years. I don't know how it's going to unfold, if it's going to come from a lawsuit, if it's going to come from the ESPN just being like, well, you know, we're paying a lot of money for, you know, other TV rights. We might need to cut the ACC. Whatever's going to happen, you know, I do think that it's not going to end with Florida State and Clemson being in the ACC past the next few years.
Will Backus from CBS Sports. Will, thanks for hopping on. I know it was late notice. I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again.
Yeah, always happy to hop on. I appreciate y'all.
All right. Will Backus from CBS Sports. Been with us a couple times. I dig the shirt in the picture that we have of him.
Oh, I didn't even notice.
Yeah, it's a nice little like aloha shirt.